Right. Yeah, Ali Madat. Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. I would like to begin by just clarifying that this is not an institutional event. This is an academic, scholarly presentation hosted by Ismaili Gnosis, which is a platform for furthering knowledge and understanding of Ismaili history and philosophy. Uh, as some of you may know, my name is Dr. Khalil Andani. I'm a professor of religion, having completed a master's and a PhD in Islamic studies at Harvard, where I specialized in Islamic thought and Ismaili theology. Now, as you know, in the past 2 weeks or so, we have all experienced truly momentous and historic events. The physical passing of our beloved 49th Imam, Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini, and the Takht Nishini of our beloved 50th Imam, Mawlana Shah Rahim al-Husseini Hazar Imam. This afternoon, we are going to explore and discuss the theological and historical significance of these unique events and how what we have just witnessed is deeply rooted in Ismaili history, Ismaili tradition, and Ismaili philosophy. So with that, I thank you for joining us. I also would like to thank the Ismaili Gnosis team, which is going to be managing the behind the scenes technicalities of today's presentation. So thank you all for joining us. And I want to begin by just by acknowledging and by sharing with you that I am aware personally, and from what I hear, that many in the Jamat are still feeling a little bit down over what has happened, and that this is a difficult time for many of us. And I thought before we start the formal presentation, I wanted to share something with you from our history, our Ismaili Fatimid history. The transition from one Imam to the next with the death of the prior Imam and the accession of the succeeding Imam, this is something that not many Murids over history got to witness firsthand. But some Murids did get to witness this, and it was also difficult for them. So I wanted to share with you something from 1,000 years ago, where the great Ismaili Dai and jurist al-Qadi an-Nu'man, he was feeling dejected when the Imam of his time, Mawlana Mansur, passed away physically. And when that happened, Qadi Nu'man wrote to the next Imam, Imam al-Muiz, expressing his worry and his sadness. And Qadi Nu'man received a letter back from Imam al-Muiz, and I've just decided to quote that letter for you on the slide. So this is what Imam al-Muiz, our 14th Imam, wrote to Qadi an-Nu'man on the passing of our 13th Imam, Mawlana Mansur. And I quote, the Imam says, I noticed that you were dejected, and I was concerned, for there is neither reason nor cause for this. What you have described of your standing with the one upon whom God bestowed blessings, that is Imam al-Mansur, and whom we hope to follow, is not veiled from us. In fact, we are its root and its branch. If his sanctified body is absent from our sight and is transferred to the infinite mercy of God, the spiritual substance is connected and unsevered. Your master has departed and your Imam has succeeded. So praise God, thank him, and submit to his will. So this is what the 14th Imam told to a great, outstanding Murid on the passing of the 13th Imam. And if you recall what happened on February 11th, 2025, on the Takht Nishini, our 50th Imam said something very similar in his Farman. if I recall from memory, our 50th Imam said, if you have worries or concerns, turn to your Imam. Your Imam is with you, and you are with the Imam. So we, as a whole global Jamaat, we received the same assurance from Mawlana Shah Rahim al-Husseini that Qadi Noman received from Mawlana al-Muiz. So we can be rest assured in that. But I do realize that many in our Jamaat have questions about what has happened, and that is the primary reason to hold this presentation. I'm going to put some of those questions on the screen. So I collected many questions from many people over the last week, and these were the top questions that were asked. So the way this is going to work is that I'm going to present some knowledge and ideas and some perspectives that will directly hit upon the questions that you see on the slide. And let me say, these are good questions. These are not bad questions. These are good questions. These are questions that rational thinking people ask about their faith. So these are good questions, and I applaud all of us for actually thinking about our faith and for asking these questions. So the first part of my presentation will directly touch upon these core questions. Following that, I will take questions in a more rapid fire way, like we did about 2 weeks ago, right? We'll deal with questions as they come in. You can submit questions on Zoom. You can also, you may have also submitted questions in the past week. So we'll look at those in a more rapid fire way. But the questions on the slide here, these questions all touch on the topic of imamat. And these are the questions that I'm going to focus on for the first part. And it'll be very clear which question we're answering. So with that, let us begin. And on the note of beginning, I think it's important to just share with you how we go about answering these questions. So there are two principles that I will be trying to apply today. And these principles come from our beloved 49th Imam Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini. The first principle is that faith should be logical and should be understood and expressed in a logical way. Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini made this speech in 1960 to the Ismaili Association of Pakistan before the Wazin at that time. And the Imam said, the real principle of Islam is that faith is logical. Islam would not be what it is if it were not logical. This is something that you must keep in mind because the very heart of Islam is logical. There is no hocus pocus. There is no nonsense. So when we are trying to answer these questions, which the Jamaat has posed, and quite rightfully so, we are going to attempt to articulate answers and responses in a logical way. Okay, we're not going to appeal to sort of magic or hocus pocus or this sort of thing. And technically speaking, the logical articulation of faith is known as theology. So first, I will be providing theological perspectives on the succession of Imamat. Furthermore, Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini has also given guidance, also to the Ismaili Association, about history. In this speech to the then Ithreb, Mawlana Shah Karim said, "You, as my chief spiritual children, should go through your own history and try to understand the development which has happened so that you can explain to your children what is the meaning of Imam and what is the meaning of faith." So here, Mawlana Shah Karim is guiding us and saying, if you want to understand the nature of the Imam and the meaning of Imamat, you have to go through your history. So today, the second perspective that will be included within my responses is a historical perspective. We will be making reference to Ismaili history. So let us move forward then. As we begin, one of the questions that is always posed is the first one over here. How do we verify the imamat and the lineage of Mawlana Hazar Imam? And this is an age-old question. Every generation of Ismaili Murids will be asking this question, and it's an excellent question. It is a really good question. So what I'd like to do is, I'm not going to answer the question fully, but I'm going to sort of lay out the roadmap on how we could find an answer to that question. How do we verify the imamat and the lineage of Hazar Imam? Interestingly, the roadmap towards that first question was restated by our 50th Mawlana Hazar Imam, Shah Rahim al-Husseini, this week at his Daknashini. And I just wanted to quote that one sentence from the Imam's Farman, where he says, the Shia Imami Ismaili Tariqah is founded on Islam's fundamental principle of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. It is also founded on Allah's final message to mankind conveyed by Prophet Muhammad and on the continuum of Imamat. Right here, the Imam has laid out the path by which we can validate the Ismaili Tariqah and the Imamat of Hazar Imam. And here, from my perspective, is how we would do it. So firstly, these three principles, Tawheed, the prophethood of Muhammad, and the Imamat of the Imams, these three principles, according to age-old Ismaili teachings, these are principles that everybody has to verify for themselves. Everybody has to intellectually validate for themselves that Tawheed is true, that prophethood is true, and that Imamat is true. 1,000 years ago, the great Ismaili Dai, Abu Hatim Arazi, said that the people of the truth, that is the Ismailis, do not permit unquestioned obedience with regards to the usul, the principles, such as God's oneness, prophethood, and the proof of Imamat. So we cannot believe in these things based on blind faith. That is historically not the Ismaili way of doing things. So without going into details, I just want to show you some of the resources that exist. So each of you on your own time could verify and validate for yourselves the truth of Tawheed, prophethood, and Imamat. So number one, on the matter of Tawheed, we have two Ismaili Gnosis articles. The first is a proof of the existence of God, and the second is an explication of Tawheed. And some of these will be pasted in the chat. I've also written an academic article on Tawheed across various schools of Islam. So that's what you should check first. Second, there are two Ismaili Gnosis articles on the prophethood of Muhammad. The first one is called Proof of Prophecy. The second one is a look at the actual roles of Prophet Muhammad. Thirdly, there are two Ismaili Gnosis articles on the proof of Imamat. The first article is Imamat in the Quran, and the second one is about Imam Ali. Next, we have an Ismaili Gnosis article on the proofs of the Imamat of Mawlana Ismail, our sixth Imam, and the Ismaili lineage of Imams. And finally, we have a very long Ismaili Gnosis article on the entire history of the lineage of Imams, starting from Imam Ali, going all the way to the present time. And this article will help you verify the historicity of the succession of Imams. So this is work that everybody has to do. Today's presentation is not focused on doing this, but once you have been able to intellectually verify, intellectually validate Tawheed, prophethood, and Imamat, and once that is the Imamat of the present Imam, then you are full intellectual warrant to follow the Imam without question, to obey the Imam without question. That's what the Dai Abu Hatim Razi says. He says, once Tawheed, prophethood, and Imamat are proven and established, it is therefore permissible to obey without question the true, just, and knowledgeable Imam. Okay, so this is just my recommended approach to the first question. How do we prove the Imamat of Mawlana Hazar Imam. And for today's presentation, which is focused on the deeper questions, we are going to take for granted that Mawlana Shah Rahim is the Imam of the time and that his ancestors were the Imams of their time. We're going to take this for granted because we're going to be relying on what past and present Imams have taught us. And to rely on that, we have to already have an established faith and belief in those Imams. So what follows, everything that follows, we are assuming the Ismaili Imamat is true, and we're just trying to get a deeper understanding of the Imamat and the succession. So now we're going to tackle the first question, which was, what is the Nur of Imamat? And how does the Nur of Imamat relate to Allah? Now, in a normal session, I could spend 3 hours, only talking about this. But today I'm going to really abbreviate my response for the sake of time. So to understand the Nur of Imamat as a concept, because Nur of Imamat is a term that we've all grown up with this term, right? I heard this as a child growing up. I heard it in BUI. I'm sure you've all heard it. So we all know the phrase Nur of Imamat or Nur of Ali, but it has been harder for us to get a conceptual and intellectual understanding of this. So this is what I want to talk about right now. So the key is, before we can conceptualize the Nur of Imamat, then it's very important that we conceptualize it. We have to first understand the Ismaili concept of Allah, the Ismaili concept of Tawheed. And I'm going to do this very quickly, but it is important to do. So what is the Ismaili understanding of Tawheed? So in summary, according to Ismaili teachings, God, Allah, is an absolutely simple and absolutely transcendent reality, which is completely independent. So Allah, in his transcendence and his oneness, Allah does not depend on anything to exist. Okay, Allah is independent. We say this in our dua. Allahu Samad, Surat al-Ikhlas, Allahu Samad. Allah is the absolutely simple, independent reality. And therefore, there is nothing in creation, whether physical or spiritual, that has any similarity with Allah, with God. And if you unpack this idea, you would conclude then that Allah is one, ahad, without parts. Allah is absolutely simple. Allah cannot be divided into different attributes or different qualities or anything like that. Allah is timeless. Timeless means without change. So Allah does not operate within time and space. Allah is beyond time and space. Allah is beyond the physical world and the spiritual world. So the physical world is the world of bodies, which is, right here. You can feel your body, the world of colors, the world of the five senses. Then there's also the spiritual world. The spiritual world is a truly existing reality, which contains spiritual substances, such as souls. Souls are part of the spiritual world. Intellects are part of the spiritual world. Angels are part of the spiritual world. What we call Nur, Ruh, this is all part of the spiritual world. So I'm saying that according to Ismaili teachings, and all of our great peers and dais have said this, and our Imams, Allah is not part of the physical world, and he is not part of the spiritual world either. Allah is beyond both because he's the creator of both. Next, according to Ismaili philosophy, taught by our Imams, our peers, and our dais, Allah does not have real distinct attributes. So it's very common today where people like to speak of God as having knowledge, power, life, hearing, speech, mercy, generosity, all these qualities that ordinary people ascribe to Allah, and they describe Allah in terms of attributes. For Ismaili Muslims, Allah is beyond attributes. Allah cannot be described by attributes. You cannot really say that Allah has knowledge. Okay. Where does this teaching come from? This teaching comes from our first Imam, Najul Balaga, Sermon 1. Mawlana Ali says, the perfection of Allah's purity is to deny him attributes. So, for example, if you think about this logically, if we supposed that Allah has some attribute, whether life or power, if you think about this conceptually, you are now positing a partner with Allah. It's Allah plus his attribute. So if you say Allah has life, or Allah has knowledge with him, or Allah has power alongside him, that means there's two gods in a sense. And that is shirk. That is polytheism. So the Ismaili solution has been to say that Allah is beyond attributes. Allah is absolutely one and absolutely solitary. Now, what you could say is Allah is the creator of attributes like knowledge and power, but those attributes exist in us. They exist in creation. The attributes do not exist in Allah himself. And this is going to become relevant very quickly. Many of our Imams and peers and dais, they prefer to speak about God or Allah in purely negative terms. So you would say God is not knowing and God is not ignorant. He is beyond the binary of having knowledge and having ignorance. Same thing for other attributes. Hamiduddin Kermani, the great Ismaili Dai, says that Allah, the Exalted, is free from and transcends the attributes which are under his creation. He is the maker of the attributes and all things. So this is like just a distillation of the Shia Ismaili concept of Tawheed, which historically goes back over 1,000 years. Now, some of you may be wondering that, okay, this is interesting. Maybe you've read a few IIS books about this topic, but I know people wonder, they say, well, how is this still true today? Maybe this was just in the past, and maybe we don't need to care about this anymore. That is one perspective. But here's another perspective. Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini, throughout his farmans for the last 7 decades, has also taught the very same concept of Allah that Ismaili Imams and Dais taught 1,000 years ago. This teaching has never changed. It has continued. I can't go through the details right now, but as in summary, in our Ginanic literature by our peers, there are many terms for Allah which convey the notion that Allah is unseen, unknowable, and beyond attributes like Nirinjan, Nirgun, Nirakar, Arup, Ahadiya, and so on and so forth. These terms are all over the Ginans. So if you want an example of a good Ginan that articulates the transcendence of Allah, I would refer you to the Ginan Khat Narinjan. Khat Narinjan, the whole Ginan is themed on the transcendence and unknowability of God. Our recent peer, Shahabuddin Shah al-Husseini, he's written a book, Khitabat Aliyah, and in that book he says, God's essence has not and will not be recognized. Whatever you say about God is your own creation and has no relationship to God's essence. Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini, in the 1975 Paris conference, Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini gave guidance, and it's in the Paris conference publication. He said to Ismaili scholars that they must emphasize the absolute transcendence of God. Now, in his farmans, in his Baitul Khiyal farmans, Mawlana Shah Karim uses a specific term for God to emphasize the transcendence of God. And he emphasizes the idea that God is he who is above all else. Now, I'm not going to quote those farmans. However, I have paraphrased some of what the Imam has taught about he who is above all else. And I was able to find at least 70 times where Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini refers to Allah as he who is above all else in his farmans. And he emphasizes, he says, for example, if you think of this world, he is above this world. If you think of this universe, he is above this universe. If you think of 2,000 universes that there may be, he is above 2,000 universes. If you think of strength, he is infinitely more powerful than any strength you can imagine. This is what Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini said about Tawheed in his Farmans, and I would encourage people to go. You can read those Farmans in Jamatkhana. They're available. Study them. Now, interestingly, Dr. Aziz Ismail, who is a scholar at the IIS, he used to lead the IIS. In an interesting article, he picks up the term "he who is above all else," and he explains that the term "he who is above all else" means that God goes beyond or transcends all human categories, right? And that God is the ultimate reality. So this, in a nutshell, it has been and continues to be the Ismaili concept of Allah. Once you understand this, the idea that Allah is absolutely transcendent, this is the notion of Tawheed. Once you understand this, you are now prepared to have a conceptual look at the concept of the Nur of Imamat. And that's what we're going to move on to next. So having established the Tawheed, the absolute unity of God, we can now consider God as the creator, because everything that exists in reality depends on God, and God alone is independent. So we know just from rational contemplation and observation, we know that creation exists, and we know that creation depends on Allah. Now, if you consider what I just said about Allah being one without parts and Allah being timeless, this entails the conclusion that Allah is eternally creating. Allah is an eternal creator. He doesn't create at a time or a place. Rather, Allah has always been creating. And there has always been a creation. This is the conclusion of logic, but this is also the teaching of our late Imam, Mawlana Shah Karim. Throughout the Silver Jubilee, 1982, 1983, Mawlana Shah Karim made several farmans across the world, and in all those farmans, the Imam said that Allah is eternal and his creation is eternal. So logically and based on the teachings of our Imams, we can accept that there has always been a creation of Allah. There was never a moment where there was no creation. Now I know some people, some of us might be confused. We may think, but wait a minute, if there's always a creation, then what's the difference between the creator and the creation? The difference is quite simple. Allah, the creator, is independent. Allah's existence does not depend on anything else. It's self-sufficient. The creation, even though the creation has always existed, the creation is dependent upon Allah. That's the difference between the creator and the creation. Independent creator, dependent creation, even if the creation has always existed. Furthermore, according to logic, and I can't argue this at length here, but according to the principles of logic, the direct creation of Allah. So there's an entity that Allah directly creates. Allah directly causes the first creation to exist from himself. The direct creation of Allah is single, is one, wahid. There is no 2, 3, or 4 direct creations of Allah. There's only one direct creation of Allah. Why? Because Allah is one without parts. So whatever emanates from Allah directly must be single. If it were not the case, then Allah would have parts, but we know Allah does not have parts. That direct creation of Allah has many names in our tradition, but one of the common names is the Amr, or the command of Allah. And Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, in his memoirs, affirms this idea. He says the creation, according to Islam, is not a unique act in a given time, but a perpetual and constant event. God supports and sustains all existence at every moment by his will and his thought. So this comes from our Imams. It's not just a philosophical idea. So that direct action, the creative action of Allah, which is directly from him, in our tariqah, in our tradition, we call it the command of Allah or the amr of Allah. And we're not the only ones who believe in this. The Sufis, who are Sunni, they also believe in this idea too. So we have Allah, and then from Allah, eternally, there issues the single action, amr, command of Allah. This is how creation unfolds. And this teaching goes all the way back to the Quran and to Imam Jafar Sadiq, to the Fatimid era, to the Alamut period, to the post-Alamut period, and to today. This has always been part of Ismaili teaching. And now, if you grasp this, and I think we are able to grasp this. Once we grasp this, we are now ready to talk about the Nur of Imamat. So this first creation of Allah, the Amr, it manifests into existence. Allah's action manifests into existence eternally, and it manifests as the first creation. And this is not first in a temporal sense, because creation is eternal. So the first creation is an eternal creation. It always exists. It's called first because the first creation issues from Allah directly without anything in between. So this first creation, which is eternal, which is one, and it is a spiritual entity. It's not a physical entity. The first creation is a spiritual entity. This is called, today, the Nur of Imamat. Today, we call it the Nur of Imamat or the Nur of Ali. In the past, we had different names. So those of us who read philosophy, those of us who read IIS books, and obviously I'm one of those people, you may be familiar with the name Universal Intellect, Aql-e-Kul, or First Intellect, Al-Aql al-Awal. These are different names for the same reality, the first creation. Whether you call it Universal Intellect, Aql-e-Kul, or the Nur of Imamat, it's okay. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. And we Ismailis, we're not the only ones who believe that the first creation of Allah is Nur. Our Sunni friends also believe in this. So in the Sunni tradition, there are hadith by the Prophet Muhammad which say the first thing God created was the pen, the first thing God created was the intellect, or the first thing God created was my light, Nur. The Sunnis also believe this. This is a very popular concept of Sunni Islam as well, but it's part of Ismaili Islam. In Shi'i sources, including like the 12er Shia sources, which I've quoted here, we have the same idea. So Imam Jafar Sadiq says 2,000 years before creation, this is talking about the physical world, so 2,000 years before physical creation, Muhammad and Ali were one light, Nur, before God. Another hadith of Imam Jafar Sadiq, which is also in Ismaili sources, God created the intellect, Aql, first among the spiritual entities. So the upshot of this, what I'm trying to explain here, is that the first eternal creation of Allah is the Nur of Imamat, which in other traditions and in older Ismaili books is called Aql-e-Kul, Universal Intellect or First Intellect. Just to show you that this concept of Nur as the first creation, this is not just a Fatimid era idea, because sometimes people come and they tell me, very well-meaning people, and they say, we hear that Dr. Andani, you speak about universal intellect and you speak about universal soul and you write about this, but this is from the Fatimid era. We don't believe this anymore. This This is based on Greek philosophy. And, very well-meaning Jamat have questions about, why are we going back to concepts from our history? Why are we bothering with that? So one reason for this is we are talking here about metaphysics, right? The Nur of Imamat pertains to the realm of the spiritual, the metaphysical. It's not about the physical world. So all the developments in science and technology, they have no bearing on the truth of the existence of the universal intellect. Uh, I can prove rationally, not scientifically, I can prove rationally that the universal intellect exists. I've written articles on this. So just because we live in the 21st century, it doesn't make the existence of the universal intellect or the Nur of Imamat somehow less probable or false. That's one reason I still talk about this. The second reason is we have teachings from recent Ismaili peers which endorse this idea. Here, I'm going to quote from Pir Shahabuddin Shah al-Husseini. He passed away in the year 1884, so he is a 19th century Ismaili peer, the older brother of Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah. This is from his book, the Kitabat Aliyah, which has actually been translated recently by a very learned person that I know. Here, Pir Shahabuddin Shah explains the concept of Nur, and I'm just going to quote. He says, a light Nur from the light of God was extracted several thousand years before the creation of this world and people. The light of Hazrat Mola, here he means Ali, Imam Ali. The light of Hazrat Mola is that light which recognized and worshipped God. In this way, the light which God preferred was invested by God with all of his powers. And then he goes on to say that Hazrat Mola, that is the light of Imam, the light of Ali, has recognized God. So that's a very interesting passage, and he's not the first to say this. If you go back and read Nasser Khosrow or Abu Yaqub as-Sijistani or Hamiduddin Kermani, if you read them, they talk about the same idea, and they say that the first creation, which is the Nur or the intellect, the first creation worships God. The first creation worships He who is above all else. And our knowledge of Allah, our knowledge of God is only possible because the first creation recognized God. And symbolically speaking, when the first creation recognizes God, when it recognizes Tawheed, it recites, symbolically, not literally, it recites La ilaha illallah, the Shahada. The Shahada that we recite, it is rooted in the first creation. The entire knowledge of the Shahada is only known to us because the first creation, which is the intellect, established the Shahada. And now that's something to think about because you may wonder why at Ismaili funerals, including the funeral of late Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini, why is the Shahada the last thing we recite? The end of physical life, we mark it with the Shahada. One reason why we chant the Shahada is because the Shahada was the beginning of existence. Right? The Shahada is embedded within the Nur of Imamat because the Nur of Imamat has eternally recognized Allah. And that recognition, that marifa that the Nur of Imamat has of He who is above all else, that marifa is then emanating on us. And that's how we come to know about Allah. So let's continue on this topic. On the same train of thought, I wanted to point out as well that from a philosophical perspective, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it is important that you know this. From a philosophical perspective, the first creation, the Nur of Imamat, is the most perfect eternal being, and it encompasses everything. And this is reflected in our dua. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And We have encompassed everything in a manifest Imam. That verse is talking about the Nur of Imamat, the first creation of Allah, in which Allah has gathered and encompassed all things. And this is a diagram which I've recreated, but this is a diagram found in the work of the great Ismaili Hujjah, Hamiduddin Kermani, Rahat al-Aql, and I've just translated a passage from his work. Here, al-Kirmani is describing the attributes and the perfection of the first intellect, or the Nur of Imamat. He says, the first intellect is living in its entirety, powerful in its entirety, knowing in its entirety, intellecting in its entirety, eternal in its entirety, encompassing in its entirety, and perfect and complete in its entirety. He goes on to say, it, that is the Nur of Imamat, is the first in existence. It is light and luminescence, glory, exaltedness, sublimity, greatness, power, and perfection. And it is pure actuality in existence without any intermediary between it and the transcendent, that is God. So what I'm saying is that from a philosophical perspective, the Nur of Imamat is the most perfect creation, most perfect. There is nothing greater in creation than the Nur of Imamat. There's nothing greater than the Nur of Imamat in creation. It is the best creation. It is the most perfect creation. And the Nur of Imamat, which again, we philosophically call this the universal intellect. The universal intellect is the closest to Allah. It's the closest to Allah. And our understanding of Allah, our recognition of Allah, like we in the world, our recognition of Allah is dependent on our recognition of the Nur of Imamat. Okay, so without the Nur of Imamat, we cannot recognize Allah. We cannot recognize He who is above all else. We need the Nur of Imamat because actually, and you're going to see it in a few moments, we were created through the Nur of Imamat. That is like how our creation took place. And we're going to see that. We're going to see that in a moment. Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini in 1985, he mentioned that the divine intellect, and then he uses the word aql-i-kul. Aql-i-kul means universal intellect. The universal intellect both transcends and informs the human intellect. So even our late Imam talked about this. So here in a public speech, he's talking about the Nur of Imamat, but he's just using a different term. Okay. Again, many people will come and say, of course, well-meaning, well, this is all from the past, and Kermani lived 1,000 years ago, and Nasser Khosrow lived 1,000 years ago, and well, why should we still follow these ideas? Well, I would just emphasize that the idea of the Nur of Imamat as the closest entity to God is firmly rooted in the Farmans of Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini. I don't want to quote those Farmans directly. However, I can paraphrase for you what they say. So the two terms that Mawlana Shah Karim used were Nur of Imamat and Nur of Ali. And he repeats this general idea throughout his Farmans. He says, it is through the Nur of Ali, through the Nur of Imamat, that you must seek to come closer to have a better understanding of He who is above all else. I counted at least 14 times where that entire phrase could be found, or similar phrases. So, for example, in one Farman, he might say something like, there is no limit to the dimension of He who is above all else. And then the next sentence, the Imam says, it is through the light of Hazrat Ali that you should seek to come close to He who is above all else. So I'm going to diagram this for you now. From a cosmic perspective, this is what it looks like. So we have Allah. This is what I've put as God's essence, absolutely transcendent, okay, unknowable, indescribable. And then we have the first creation, which is the universal intellect, which today the Imam and the community calls the Nur of Imamat or the Nur of Ali. And the Nur of Imamat is perfect. It is spiritual. It's not a physical light. And this is a key point when we talk about Imamat succession. The Nur of Imamat is not a physical light. It's not made of photons. It's not in our universe. Like it's not an object in our universe like a table or a chair. The Nur of Imamat is a spiritual light. And a spiritual entity means something that exists, but it is not restricted or limited to the five senses, and it is not localized to this place or this time. So the Nur of Imamat, although it's created by Allah, it is not limited in time and space. It is still beyond time and space because it's not physical. Now, from the Nur of Imamat, there's a second Nur that emanates out of it. And I'm not going to talk about that at length today, but you should just be aware that from the Nur of Imamat, the universal intellect, a second lesser light emanates. And that light is called the universal soul. Sometimes it's called the Nur of prophethood. And then the universal soul creates the rest of creation, including souls and bodies. So this is generally how the hierarchy of creation works. And one thing you should be aware of is because Allah in Ismaili philosophy, Allah transcends names and attributes. So you can't describe Allah. Even the names of Allah that we ordinarily use, when we use a name for Allah, we don't seek to describe Allah. Rather, when we give him a name, we are simply referring to Allah, but without the descriptive sense of the name. So yes, in our dua, we may say Allah is Rahman and Allah is Rahim. That is all true. But when we apply the word Rahman to Allah or Rahim to Allah, we are not really saying that Allah has mercy or compassion. What we're saying is that from Allah comes mercy and compassion. So Allah is not describable through names. However, the Nur of Imamat is describable through names. So the descriptive sense of all the names of Allah, Rahman, Rahim, Nur, Al-Hayyul Qayyum, Al-Qadir, Al-Alim, Al-Alim, Al-Hakim, Al-Haq. These are all names of Allah. Awal, Akhir, Zahir, Batin. These are all names of Allah. If you take them literally, they don't describe Allah. They describe the Nur of Imamat. They describe the universal intellect. And that's a really, really important point to keep in mind. So when we think of God, but we think of descriptions, we're not actually thinking of God. We are thinking of the Nur of Imamat, the first intellect. And this is why on the prior slide, the Ismaili Dai, al-Kirmani, if you notice the adjectives he uses, he says the first intellect is living, powerful, knowing, perfect. He's basically saying that all the names of Allah as descriptions, they properly describe the Nur of Imamat. They don't actually describe Allah because Allah is greater than anything we can describe. So that's the takeaway here. So I hope we can sort of take a mini pause here, right? What we've done so far is we've just addressed these two questions. So now I can give a short answer. What is the Nur of Imamat? How does it relate to Allah? The answer is the Nur of Imamat is the first and greatest creation of Allah. How does it relate to Allah? The Nur of Imamat eternally depends on Allah for its existence. That's what I'm saying then. What I'm saying in short is that the Nur of Imamat technically is not identical to Allah. The Nur of Imamat is the first creation and the first manifestation of Allah, but it's not the same as Allah. That's my short answer. But the Nur of Imamat is greater than everything else in creation. It's the greatest creation. Okay. Let us continue. Now we're going to we're starting very sort of general and universal, and we're now going to get more specific because we're going to relate the Nur of Imamat to the person of the Imam. That's what we're going to do. But you know what? Why don't we, since this was a bit heavy, let's take a short break. We can take a short 5 minute breather. Okay. And then we'll continue. And when we get back in about 5 minutes, let's say 7 minutes. So we will resume at the top of the hour. Okay. So we'll take a short 7 minute break. All right, we are going to resume. So, well, we've answered these two questions, and I realize that for some of us, the discussion so far must seem sort of abstract, and that's okay. So, quick review. What is the Nur of Imamat? The Nur of Imamat is the first, greatest, and most perfect creation of God. It is eternal. It is spiritual. It's a spiritual light. It's not a physical light. It's eternal. It's beyond time and space. How does the Nur of Imamat relate to Allah? The Nur of Imamat is dependent on Allah. Allah is independent. That's the difference. Allah is beyond attributes and descriptions. The Nur of Imamat has the most perfect attributes and descriptions. So that's also how they relate. So we've talked about the Nur of Imamat, we've talked about Tawheed. So now we're going to shift and focus on the relationship between the Nur of Imamat and the Imam of the time, the living Imam. That's what we're going to talk about now. To introduce this section, I want to share with you remarks that Mawlana Shah Karim made at the Silver Jubilee on July 11th, 1982. This speech or this discourse of the Imam, it has been shared a long time ago. It has been shared by white zines and other Jamati presentations, so it may not be new to some of you. But Mawlana Shah Karim said, he began his address at the Silver Jubilee homage ceremony by saying, 25 years ago, this day, close to midday, my grandfather passed away, bequeathing to me the Imamat, which was passed over to him by the previous Imam, representing the Nur of Ali, which today is in me as I stand before you. So here we have Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini saying quite clearly that the Nur of Ali, or the Nur of Imamat, is in him. And many of you will recall, if you have read the Farmans of Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, in Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah's first Farman, September 1st, 1885, the Imam said, O Jamat, do not think I am small. My grandfather is Amir al-Mu'minin, Mawlana Ali. My grandmother is the Lady of Paradise, Bibi Fatima Zahra. We are the Nur of Ali and the Prophet. Although small in age, I am exalted. That's what Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah said. And in that same Farman, Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah says, we are the Nur of Ali. We are the Nur of Mawla Murtaza Ali. And he says the same Nur, the same light that is in me was in my ancestors, Aga Hassan Ali Shah, Aga Ali Shah, and so on. So the Imams are very clear that they hold the Nur of Ali. But what does that mean? The term that we are used to is bearer of the Nur. Okay, so you've probably heard, and Hazar Imam Shah Karim said this in a public interview once, that he is the bearer of the Nur. Well, what does that mean to be the bearer of the Nur? Does the Nur of Imamat exist inside physically a place, a body? Well, that wouldn't make sense, because I had explained earlier that the Nur of Imamat is a spiritual reality. It's not a physical reality. It's a spiritual reality. In fact, the whole universe has been created through the Nur of Imamat. This diagram that you see here, right? We have God, we have Allah at the top. Then we have the Nur of Imamat, which we call the Universal Intellect. And then we have the spiritual world of souls. And then we have the physical world. So the spiritual and physical worlds, they have come into existence from the Nur of Imamat. The universe has been created from the Nur of Imamat. So it cannot be the case that the Nur of Imamat is physically contained in a human body. That's not what the term bearer of the Nur means. So to better understand this, we have to sometimes use a more sophisticated terminology. And the more sophisticated terminology, which also comes from the guidance at the Paris conference, is Mazhar. Okay, so technically speaking, if you really want to articulate this and think about this logically, remember we said at the beginning, right, that we are going to take a logical approach to our faith, to Imamat. We're going to take a logical approach. there is no hocus pocus. So although I acknowledge, and this is also how I was brought up, right? You may have heard this somewhat well-meaning, but mythical notion, right? That the Nur is inside the Imam's body, and that Nur then travels or transfers from one Imam to the next, like the Nur jumps from one body to the next body. You may have heard this growing up. I definitely heard. I heard it growing up too, and that's okay because when you want to explain something to little children, you're going to use some very crude metaphors to do that. But uh, we are adults now. We're not children, and to be honest, today's children are too smart for this. I can definitely tell you that. You know, my son asks me tough questions all the time. Our kids today are too smart for crude metaphors, so I want to move past the children's level analogy that the nur is inside the imam's body and then it jumps to the next body. I'm going to offer a different perspective, which is rooted in Ismaili theology and philosophy, and that is the concept of Mazhar. So I would define the Imam of the time or the Imam in general as the Mazhar of the Nur of Imamat, not literally the container of the Nur of Imamat, but the Mazhar of the Nur of Imamat. So what does that mean? A Mazhar technically means a place where something manifests, a place where something is displayed. That's what a Mazhar is. And the best analogy that I could give you on what Mazhar means is the word mirror. Mirror. Okay. The Imam in his soul and his body is the mirror of the Nur of Imamat in this world. I'm going to repeat that. The Imam, with respect to his human soul, the Imam has a human soul. It's a pure soul, but it is a soul. So the Imam has a soul and a body, just like we all have a soul and a body. So the Imam's soul is the Mazhar, the mirror of the Nur of Imamat. Now, think about how a mirror functions, right? So the great scholar Henry Corbin says that the Imams are divine epiphanies, theophanies. The technical vocabulary, Mazhar, always has reference to the comparison with the phenomenon of a mirror. The image appearing in the mirror is not incarnate or immanent in the substance of the mirror. Here's what we're saying. The Nur of Imamat is present in the Imam. It is present in the Imam, but it is present in the soul of the Imam. And it is present in the Imam without being contained by the Imam. The Nur of Imamat is present in the Imam in the same way that if you have a mirror and you shine a light on the mirror, the light will reflect on the surface of the mirror. So now when you look at the mirror, you can see the light. Yet the light source is not within the mirror. The light source is outside the mirror, but the light ray reflects on the surface of the mirror. In the same way, what I'm trying to convey here is the Imam's humanity is the mirror in which the Nur of Imamat is reflected without being contained inside the Imam. The Nur of Imamat is outside the universe. It's beyond time and space. However, because the Imam's soul is pure, that Nur of Imamat, which is transcendent, it gets reflected within the personality of the Imam, within the humanity of the Imam. So the Imam is a human being, and the Imam's perfect humanity mirrors and reflects the Nur of Imamat, and the qualities of the Nur of Imamat, which, as I said earlier, the Nur of Imamat comprises the divine names and attributes. So the Imam in his humanity is a reflection of the divine names and attributes. Without God or the Nur of Imamat physically being inside the Imam. That never happens. Okay. So because the Nur of Imamat is a spiritual reality, it's not a physical reality, because it's a spiritual reality, the Nur of Imamat does not physically live inside the Imam's body, as if if you had an X-ray machine on, you could see the Nur of Imamat. That's not how it is. The Nur of Imamat is spiritually reflected in the human soul of the Imam, which is a pure, polished human soul. And therefore, the Imam in this world is a human being. He's a real human being. The Imam is not an alien. The Imam is not some other form of life. The Imam is a human being, physically speaking, genetically speaking. And the Imam has an eternal human soul. But the Imam's human soul is so pure, it's so spotless, it's so clean, that the Nur of Imamat, with all of its perfections, shines within the Imam's soul. And that's what it means for the Imams to be the bearer of the Nur. Bearer of the Nur means they are the mirror of the Nur. That's what it means. For those who are more interested in technical stuff, the way that the Nur of Imamat reflects in the soul of the Imam, the way that's done is through a ray of light, a ray of spiritual light called the Holy Spirit, the Ruhul Qudus. Okay. And I'm not going to dwell on this right now, but that's just for your information. Because of the Holy Spirit, the qualities of the Nur of Imamat are present within the soul of the Imam. So the Imam's soul is distinguished by virtues which are reflections of the names of God. That's sort of how it works. And what this manifests as in this world is the Imam's humanity, which is a very special humanity, right? So it's not that the Imam is not human. The Imam is human, but he's a perfect human. He's a perfect human. And let me clarify what that means, because when I say perfect human, a lot of people may get the wrong idea of what, we think of perfect human, and people think of like, characters from movies or something. That's not what I mean. So I'm actually going to quote a Christian scholar named Keith Ward, who gives he doesn't really realize that he's actually describing the Imam here. He's trying to describe a perfect human being in the sight of God. But this is a very useful quote to understand how the Imam is human. So Keith Ward says that a perfect human would be someone who's never egoistic. He's never overwhelmed by self-centered passion. He is mindful, self-controlled, compassionate, loving. He experienced a constant sense of the presence of God. Such a person would not need repentance or faith in the sense of contrition for wrongdoing or commitment to a God who's not fully known. Such a person, a perfect human, could only exist by an extraordinary act of God exercised continuously through a whole human life to preserve that person from evil and fill a whole life with the spirit of wisdom and love. Now, Keith Ward is a Christian, so his only conclusion is it is theoretically possible for such a human being to exist. From our perspective as Shia Ismaili Muslims, we would say that this perfect human in the eyes of God that Keith Ward has described, that perfect human is Mawlana Hazar Imam and every Imam. So the reason for this is because of the Nur of Imamat. The Nur of Imamat is reflected in the Imam as this perfect humanity. And therefore, it is no surprise. Think about what we saw 1 week ago. When Mawlana Shah Karim left this world physically, I'm sure you paid attention, we all paid attention to the immense flood of tributes from world leaders about the late Imam. Every world leader, every prominent person came out and paid tribute to our Imam as this extraordinary, immensely great human being. That's not a coincidence. That's by design, in a sense. It's because the late Imam, like his ancestors and like his successor, he was a perfect human being. And because our last couple of Imams were so public, now everybody gets to see that. They get to see him firsthand. So, for example, a Sunni biographer of Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, K.K. Aziz, he refers to Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah. Remember, he's not Ismaili. K.K. Aziz is a Sunni, but he refers to Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah as an extraordinary human being with unwavering and sensitive sympathy for ordinary human beings. The Aga Khan's love for humanity, for each individual human being, was his most fundamental motive for seeking world peace and ending wars. So this is from someone who only knows the Imam in his human capacity, but even he attests to the extraordinary humanity of Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah. For Mawlana Shah Karim, you can go online on the institutional website. I think they compiled all the tributes that people have said about the Imam, the late Imam. I'll just share one with you. This, of course, is about 20 years ago, but the former president of the World Bank, Wolfenson, he says about Mawlana Shah Karim, there is one thing which distinguishes him, which is not in the buildings and not in the organization. It is the extraordinary sense of humanity that he has, the great depth of real feeling for real people. So these are non-Ismailis who cannot help but attest to the extraordinary, exalted, sublime humanity of the recent Imams. And again, the reason why the Imams have this great humanity to them is because their humanity is a reflection of the Nur of Imamat, which is the greatest creation of God. Okay, so that idea again, the review point is the Imam as a human being is the mirror of the Nur of Imamat. That's the takeaway, right? Each Imam is a mirror of the Nur of Imamat. And this, of course, takes us to this question. Do the Imams have different individual souls? And this is an important question because how you answer this question directly impacts what is going on in the succession of Imams, right? So you have one Imam who passes away, the next Imam takes over. So do they have the same soul or do they have different souls? Because these are some of the questions that that people have asked. So let's now focus on this topic. Do the Imams have different individual souls? So the quick answer is yes. The quick answer is yes. So going back to what I said, that the Imam is the mirror of the Nur of Imamat, I would add now that there are multiple mirrors of the Nur of Imamat. There are multiple Mazhars of the Nur of Imamat. There are multiple bearers of the Nur of Imamat. Each Imam individually has a soul, and that soul is perfect, and it is a mirror of the Nur of Imamat. So the Imams collectively are perfect souls. Now, where do the souls of the Imam come from? Well, I mean, to make a long story short, the Nur of Imamat, which is the first creation, through the mediation of the universal soul, creates the perfect souls of the Imams. The souls of the Imams, according to Ismaili teachings and general Shi'i teachings, the souls of the Imams, this is different from the Nur of the Imam. The souls of the Imams are created before the physical world is created. So they pre-exist. This is a hadith from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, which you can find in 12 Shi'i sources, including IIS books. So he says, the Imam says, the first of what God created was Muhammad and his progeny as guides and rightly guided ones. They, referring to the Imams, they were silhouettes of light before God, shadows of light, luminous bodies without spirits. They were supported through a single spirit, that is the Holy Spirit. So you see this reference being made to the Holy Spirit. So what this hadith is talking about is it's saying that at a lower level of existence, under the Nur of Imamat, the souls or the spirits of the Imams were created, and then the souls of the Imams are connected always to the Nur of Imamat through the Holy Spirit, which I've represented right over here. Okay, so what I'm saying then is yes, the Imams each have different souls. And you can tell this because if you study our history and if you just look at recent history, take Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, Mawlana Shah Karim, Mawlana Shah Rahim. Now, they all have the same Nur. There's no debate about that. The same Nur is reflected in Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, Mawlana Shah Karim, Mawlana Shah Rahim. No doubt. However, you will note that these three Imams have three different personalities. They have different personality traits. They have different individualities. That's because the Imams have different souls, even though the same Nur is reflected in all these souls. So the mirrors are different. The light is the same. That's how I would explain it. This idea that the Imams are a plurality of souls, it's also something we find in Ismaili books. So this is a quote from the you can't see the citation, but this is a quote from an IIS book about Imam al-Muiz. And here, Imam al-Muiz says in a letter, this is a letter of the Imam. When God wills a matter, he decrees it, and when he decrees it, he accomplishes it. Concerning us, he's talking about the Imams. Concerning us, it was his decree prior to creation to create us as shapes and manifest us as spirits, possessors of power and precedent, before the heavens were formed or an earth stretched out. Notice the plural. The Imam is talking about the creation of the Imams as spirits, plural, or as souls. So this is a different level of creation than the single Nur of Imamat. This is at a lower level of the hierarchy. Nevertheless, the Imam is telling us that before the physical earth was created, the Imam's souls or spirits were created. And that's why this is in the plural. And if you're sort of tracking what I'm saying, once you understand this, you can easily answer some of those other questions that have come up, like, oh, how does succession work? And does the Imam know? And we're going to get there. Okay. This idea that the Imams have different souls, and number two, the souls of the Imams already exist before they come into the physical world. So I'm going to say that more clearly. The soul of Mawlana Shah Karim already existed in the spiritual world before he was born. The soul of Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah already existed in the spiritual world before he was born. The soul of Mawlana Hazar Imam Shah Rahim already existed in the spiritual world before he was born. This is true for all the Imams. So in the spiritual world, which we can't see physically, but in the spiritual world, all the Imams are there. They're all ready. They're all waiting. The Imams of the future are waiting to come. They're waiting their turn. They all exist together. There is, in the spiritual world, there is a communion of Imams, i.e., the souls of all the Imams are there. They're connected together. The Nur of Imamat is shining upon all the souls of all the Imams, and they're all there waiting. In fact, if you were at Jamatkhana this week on February 11th, Taknashini Day, you yourself recited a tasbih where we affirmed that the Imams are already present in the spiritual world and they're waiting to come. Let me show you. When Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini turned 80 in the year 2016, the Jamaat recited this special salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin al-Mustafa wa ala alin al-Murtada wa ala al-Aymat al-Tahirin wal muntazirin minhum ila yawmadin wa ala Imamin al-Hadar al-Mawjud Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini. This was the 2016 80th birthday tasbih. We also recited this in 2018 Diamond Jubilee. Same tasbih. Then, this week, we recited the exact same tasbih, except with the name of our present Imam Mawlana Shah Rahim al-Husseini. Now, here's what I want to draw your attention to in case you missed it. I've highlighted. So this is a salawat. We are saying, O Allah, send your blessings upon Muhammad al-Mustafa and upon Ali al-Murtada and upon the pure Imams, that's Aymat al-Tahirin, pure Imams, and, well, those among them, minhum, who are waiting to come, al-Muntazirin. Al-Muntazirin means those who are waiting. So send your blessings upon the pure Imams and those among them who are waiting to come until the day of judgment. Well, who is that referring to? Those who are waiting to come refers to the Imams of the future, the Imams who are yet to be born. In this tasbih, we are invoking the blessings of Allah on the Prophet, the past Imams, the present Imam, and the future Imams. So you see, in the form of a soul, all the future Imams exist. You cannot invoke salawat on somebody who doesn't exist. It doesn't make any sense. So if I say, may God's blessings be upon so-and-so, so-and-so actually has to exist. Otherwise, the prayer is meaningless. So this tasbih is telling us that the past Imams exist and the future Imams exist and the present Imam exists. The only difference is the past Imams and the future Imams are not manifest physically right now. That's the only difference. The reason why we call today Shah Rahim is Hazar Imam is because Shah Rahim is manifest in the physical world. The other Imams exist, but they are not manifest in the physical world, but they still exist. The future Imams exist. That's why we're saying, may Allah send his blessings upon those among them who are waiting to come until the day of judgment. We all said this in Kane just a few days ago. You know, this is one of those things where the answer to your questions, the answer to our questions is often hiding in plain sight and staring us in the face. And then once we pay attention, we realize that. So we're going to move to the next questions now, but so far we're sort of building together. And what we've sort of talked about is how each Imam is the mirror, the bearer of the Nur of Imamat, and the Nur of Imamat is the first and greatest creation of Allah. Okay, that's where we're at right now. So now, using this knowledge, we can tackle some of the more difficult questions that have been raised. Does the Nur of Imamat transfer to the next Imam upon the death of the prior Imam? Does the succeeding Imam already know he is the Imam? This is what we're going to do next. So we're going to take a quick break. I need a break as well. Um, 10 minutes. So at 42 minutes, past the hour, we will continue and we will tackle these questions, which, and these were like some of the top questions that were sent. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, we are going to resume. So we've done a lot so far. We've talked about the concept of Tawheed. We've talked about the concept of the Nur of Imamat as the first and most perfect creation of God. We've talked about the relationship between the individual Imam as the mirror of the Nur of Imamat. And we just talked about how the Imams have different souls, although the Imam souls are pure and polished. So each Imam has his own soul, and each Imam, through his soul, is an individual mirror or Mazhar of the Nur of Imamat. That's what we've talked about so far. So with that knowledge established, we can now address some of these more intricate questions. Number one, does the Nur of Imamat transfer to the next Imam upon death? And does the succeeding Imam already know he's the Imam? So let's go forward with this. So generally speaking, Imamat succession since the time of the first Imam has always continued through heredity and nas being designation. So since the beginning of the Imamat in the human species, each Imam has appointed his successor from among his male descendants. Now, when I say first Imam, who am I talking about? Who are we talking about? Who is the first Imam among the human species? We have Ismaili and general Shi'i teachings which tell us that there must always be an Imam in the cosmos at all times. There has always been an Imam. And therefore, as long as there's been humanity, there has been an Imam within humanity. It is impossible for there to be humanity on earth and there not to be an Imam. So when I say the first Imam among humanity, I'm not talking about Mawlana Ali. Mawlana Ali is not the first Imam in the absolute sense. Mawlana Ali is the first Imam to teach the Talim and the Tawil of the message of Prophet Muhammad. But there were Imams before Mawlana Ali. There were Imams before Prophet Muhammad. So Ismaili texts tell us that the first Imam of humanity was not Ali. The first Imam of humanity was Adam. But again, we're not talking about the Adam who you read about in the Bible or the Quran. There was an Adam before the Adam of the Quran and the Bible. There was an Adam who was the first human being on earth, and that Adam we call the universal Adam. So the universal Adam is the first Imam of humanity. And if I had more time, I would explain to you that there's actually Imams even before there were humans. There's always been an Imam in the cosmos in some form. But I'm just talking about the first Imam of humanity. So this is where Imamat begins as a formal office within the human species. It begins with the universal Adam. And since that time in humanity, the Imamat has continued through lineage and through nas, through designation or appointment. Now, the reason why Imamat continues in these two manners is because if the Imams were not linked by heredity, if they had no genealogical relationships among themselves, it would be very difficult for a human living at any time to find the Imam. It would be impossible to recognize the Imam. So the reason why Imamat continues in one male hereditary lineage is it facilitates the recognition of the Imam by humanity at any given time. Similarly, the reason why the office of Imamat is transmitted by nas, by appointment, is this is the only way that we can come to recognize one imam after another. If there was no designation and only lineage, there would be multiple candidates on who the imam could be, and we wouldn't be able to figure it out ourselves. Similarly, if there was only designation but no lineage, it would be very easy for anybody from any family to claim a false designation. However, when you put these two things together, you have a lineage and you have a designation, and they're combined. This narrows down for us the identity of the Imam of our time, because we just have to look for these two signs with one person, and that's the Imam. And although, as you know, uh, there have been splits in Shia history over who the Imam is, there haven't been so many splits when it comes to designation. So designation and lineage serve as markers by which the true Imam at any given time can be recognized by the people of that time. And this is what Nasiruddin Tusi writes in the Alamut period in an IIS book called Contemplation and Action. He says at the end, by testifying to these two proofs, all the inhabitants of the world have access to the individual who is the locus of manifestation, the Mazhar of that light, the light of Imamat. Okay, so all these mechanics of succession exist to facilitate our recognition of the Imam. Okay, that's why they exist. And again, Imamat did not begin with Imam Ali. If you go through Ismaili sources, we have information on the identity of the Imams before Mawlana Ali. And you can see it in this genealogical chart that we have. Yes, Shah Karim is the 49th Imam. Imam Hussein was the second Imam. Imam Ali was the first Imam. This is just after Prophet Muhammad. But before Prophet Muhammad, there were Imams. And I think many of us sort of have been taught this, like this shouldn't be a surprise anymore. So before Maulana Ali, the Imam, the hereditary Imam, was Maulana Imam Abu Talib, the father of Maulana Ali. And before Maulana Imam Abu Talib, the Imam was Maulana Imam Abdul Muttalib. And before Abdul Muttalib, the Imam was Maulana Hashim. And before Maulana Hashim, the Imam was Maulana Abd Manaf. And if you trace the lineage all the way back, we reach Maulana Ismail, the son of Prophet Ibrahim. And you can trace the lineage even back before that. Even Prophet Adam, there was an Imam before him. That was his father, Maulana Hunayd. This is, of course, a whole different topic, but I just wanted to make you aware of how vast the history of the Imamate succession actually is. Imamate didn't begin with Prophet Muhammad, right? Islam doesn't begin with Prophet Muhammad. The Quran says that Islam is the religion brought and taught by every prophet. Islam, according to the Quran, always existed. Islam is the religion of nature. So as long as there's been Islam, there's been Imams. And as long as there's been Imams, there's been Imama. And this is just something to keep in mind. And, we could do a whole other session on Imamat before Prophet Muhammad. It's a very exciting topic to have. But I just want to make you aware of this. All right. Now, on the matter of succession. So there is a succession of Imams. It's been going on for time immemorial, and it will continue into the future. Maulana Shah Karim said in 1983, Kenya, Nairobi Darbar, right? I am the 49th Imam, and there will be Imams in the future, and it might be the space age, right? You remember he said that? So we have a promise that there will be Imams in the future. So how does succession work? So here's a simplified explanation. On earth, there is always one Imam of the time. and he is the speaking Imam. So the Imam of the time is the Imam on earth who has the authority, the Amr of the Imamat. So he is the leader. He is our Mullah. He is giving farmans. He is in charge. So we refer to that as the Imam of the time or the speaking Imam. And as I already explained, the Imam of the time is the Mazhar, the mirror of the Nur of Imamat. He, in his pure humanity, he reflects the Nur of Imamat, and he is divinely assisted by the Holy Spirit. So the Nur of Imamat connects to the Imam of the time soul through this entity, this intermediary called the Holy Spirit. Okay. But remember, I also just explained to you that every Imam has his own soul. So there are multiple Imams in existence, in creation. There are multiple Imams in the spiritual world. And each Imam is a mirror of the Nur of Imamat. Now, in the physical world, accompanying the Imam of the time, there is another Imam. We would refer to that as the successor Imam. But when the Imam of the time is speaking and functioning, the next Imam, although he's physically with him, and the next Imam also has the Nur of Imamat, and I'll talk more about this. The next Imam, who is a mirror of the Nur of Imamat, he is silent. So the next Imam, in the lifetime of the present Imam, he is an Imam, but he is not functioning. He does not have the Amr. He does not have the authority of the office of Imamat. Okay? So we call that the silent Imam. So in every era, there is a speaking Imam. That is the person we call Imam Zaman, Mawlana Hazar Imam. But with the speaking Imam, there is also a silent Imam. The silent Imam is going to be the Imam who succeeds when the present Imam leaves the world. But I want to emphasize to you that both of these individuals are Imams. Both of these individuals are bearers of the one Nur of Imamat. The Nur of Imamat does not transfer when the prior Imam dies. It is not the case that when Mawlana Shah Karim left this world physically, the Nur floats out of his body and enters into the body of Shah Rahim. That is not how this matter works. I know that maybe some of us have been taught this. I understand. I was probably taught this by somebody when I was a kid. So, I understand that maybe this is what you're used to hearing. However, if we examine these matters from a more philosophical and logical and historical perspective, we will find that in actual fact, the Nur of Imamat does not transfer from the present Imam to the next Imam when the present Imam dies. The Nur of Imamat is already present in the next Imam since his soul was created. The Nur of Imamat is not a physical entity. To put it more crudely, the Nur of Imamat is not a baton that one Imam hands over to the next in some sort of relay race. The Nur of Imamat is not a physical asset, right? It's not a physical object, like this. A physical object moves from one place to another place. The Nur of Imamat is not a physical object. The Nur of Imamat is a universal, cosmic, spiritual reality, right? That's what the Nur of Imamat is. So once we understand that the Nur of Imamat is not a physical asset, it's not a physical thing, then it should be no surprise that the Nur of Imamat is present in the present Imam and the future Imam when both of them are on earth and even before they come to this world. So even before the future Imam physically is born, his soul carries the Nur of Imamat in the spiritual world. And that's true for all the Imams. They all have the Nur of Imamat. Okay. So this should actually answer one of those questions, right? Does the Nur of Imamat transfer upon the death of the prior Imam? Strictly speaking, the answer is no. There is no transfer because there's no need for a transfer. But wait, does something transfer? Yes, something does transfer, but it's not the Nur. What transfers is the authority of the Imamat. This is what we call the Amr. Okay. So when Mawlana Shah Karim passed away physically, the moment of his last breath, the authority, the Amr of the Imamat transferred from Mawlana Shah Karim to Mawlana Shah Rahim. That's what happened. So if you want to talk about transfer, that's fine, but it's the authority that transfers. It's not the Nur that transfers. Okay. So again, we'll keep going on this. This is not my personal opinion. I didn't just make this up because it sounds nice. This is an idea that's firmly rooted and backed in the teachings of our Imams. So let me give you an example. So here we have a tradition of Mawlana Imam Jafar Sadiq. So Zurara asked Imam Jafar Sadiq, can the earth be left without an Imam? No. Then we asked, can there be two Imams in the earth? The Imam said, no, unless one of the two Imams is silent and not speaking. The Imam continued, the one before him is speaking, and the Imam recognizes the Imam who is after him. So what Imam Jafar Sadiq is explaining is exactly what we have here in the diagram. We have the speaking Imam, which is Imam of the time, and we have the silent Imam, who is going to succeed to the office of Imamat. The silent Imam has the Nur of Imamat already. He's always had that Nur, but he's silent, which means until the present Imam declares the Imamat of the future Imam, the future Imam is not going to tell anyone, and he's not going to reveal to anyone that he is an Imam because he doesn't have the authority or the Amr to do that yet. And what is transferred upon the nas or the designation is authority. And the normal practice actually was the future Imam would be designated in the lifetime of the present Imam. That's how it usually works. It's only recently where the designation, the nas, happens in the will, right? But that you're going to see that it doesn't really matter when the designation happens. The designation, the nas, where one Imam appoints the next, that is only for us. That's so we may recognize who our Imam is. That designation does not make the next Imam any more special than he already was. Okay. Let me give you an example of this from our history, right? So this is an eyewitness account of the coming of Imam al-Mahdi, our 11th Imam, and Imam al-Qa'im, our 12th Imam. Both of these Imams were together. They were like a dynamic duo in a sense, they were like partners. And everybody knew that Imam al-Mahdi is the Imam of the time, and his son, Imam al-Qa'im, is the successor. Everybody knew this. So I just want you to look at the second paragraph where Ibn al-Haytham describes in his own through his own eyes, the status of the present Imam and the future Imam. So he says, no one was left riding except the commander of the faithful, al-Mahdi. May the blessings of God be upon him, the sun most radiant, and his son, the shining moon and glittering light, Abul Qasim al-Qa'im. So he's just referred to the current Imam and the successor Imam as Nur, as light. And then he says, these two, these two Imams, may the blessings of God be upon them both, were the light of the world. This is exactly what I just explained. So the speaking Imam and the silent Imam, both of them are Imams. They're both Imams. The next Imam is not just, he's not some ordinary Joe, and then he wakes up one day after his father dies and he like powers up, like a Super Mario character getting a star. That's not actually how it works. And if you think about it, that sounds a lot like hocus pocus, right? And what did Mawlana Shah Karim say? There's no hocus pocus. In our religion, there's no hocus pocus. So this whole thing of the Nur, jumping from one Imam's body to the next Imam's body when the previous Imam passes away, this is sort of like the hocus pocus story. And, it's useful, for children maybe. It's a beginning to the learning process, but I think if we study these matters in a little bit more depth, right? We'll find that we get a different answer. Okay. I want to show you another example of what I'm saying. So sometimes we have more than one silent imam. Sometimes we have three silent imams all at the same time and one speaking imam. And this is an example from Fatimid history. And some of you may know this. So I'm just going to read this out. This is a very moving story, I thought. One day, Imam al-Qa'im bi Amrillah was in his father, Imam al-Mahdi's majlis, seated in front of him. His son, so Imam al-Qa'im's son, al-Mansur, was standing in front of his grandfather. So now there's three. When al-Mahdi said to him, he said to al-Mansur, bring me your son. That is, Imam al-Muiz lidin Allah. So his nursemaid brought him. He, Imam al-Muiz, was 1 year or a little older. Al-Mahdi took baby Imam Muiz on his lap, and he kissed him, and he said to his son al-Qa'im, O Abul Qasim, there is not a majlis more illustrious on earth than this one, as 4 Imams are gathered here. That is, al-Mahdi, his son al-Qa'im, his grandson al-Mansur, and his great-grandson al-Muiz. So this, what we just heard, this was a majlis, a gathering of 4 Imams. And notice how the text refers to all 4 as Imams. It doesn't say 1 Imam and 3 ordinary Joes who are waiting their turn. No, it says 4 Imams. And from the same memoir, it was reported by Abul Fadl Raiden, the parasol bearer. He said that Imam al-Mahdi gathered the 3 Imams with himself in a cloak. And he said, the Prophet of God, may God bless him and grant him peace, gathered in his garment 3 Imams in addition to himself. But in this cloak, there are 4 Imams. Okay, so there you go. 4 Imams. And they're all Imams. The difference here, right, is Imam al-Mahdi is the speaking Imam, so he has the Amr. The other 3 Imams are fully Imams. They all have the Nur of Imamat, but they don't have that Amr. When Imam al-Mahdi passes away, the Amr, the authority, will pass to Imam al-Qa'im, and so on and so forth. So what transfers on the death of an Imam is the Amr, not the Nur. The Nur is always with all the Imams. What we also find very interesting, going back to our history, is we have accounts where when you had 4 Imams together, like in the Fatimid era, the grandfather Imam and the grandson Imam were very, very close together. So we hear that Al-Muiz, Imam Al-Muiz had a special status with his grandfather, Imam Al-Qa'im. Al-Qa'im used to keep Imam Al-Muiz in his company. He was close to him. He confided in him. In fact, according to this, Imam Al-Muiz was closer to his grandfather, Imam Al-Qa'im, than he was to his own father. And whenever Imam Al-Qa'im was alone, he would ask for Imam Al-Muiz to be brought to him. So we have some very nice stories like this. Similarly, we have Imam al-Mansur was very close to his grandfather, Imam al-Mahdi. We are told that Imam al-Mahdi used to confide secrets to Imam al-Mansur, and nobody was privy to what transpired between them. And likewise, Imam al-Mahdi used to nurture Imam al-Mansur with wisdom and prepare him for the Imamat, just as Imam al-Qa'im did the same with Imam al-Muiz. So we have this very interesting idea where there are multiple Imams at the same time, and further evidence that they are Imams is that these Imams have like very private, intimate discourse between themselves. In fact, we saw this happen recently with Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah and Mawlana Shah Karim. So Mawlana Shah Karim's mother reports in a biography of Mawlana Shah Karim. She says, an extraordinary relationship developed between my father-in-law, Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, and my elder son, Shah Karim. Karim, always talked to his grandfather as if they were contemporaries. There was a powerful bond between them. It was probably due to his grandfather's influence that Karim was mature beyond his age. So this happened 1,000 years ago, and it happened recently. So what is like the takeaway here? The takeaway here, and this is explicitly affirmed by our 23rd Imam, Mawlana Hassan al-Zikri Salam, in a book published by the IIS. You can just go buy this book. Imam al-Zikri Salam says, quote, the Imam is perfect when still in the womb. The Imam is perfect when still in the form of sperm, in the loins of his father, and in the pure womb of his mother. An Imam is always an Imam and always perfect. He goes on to explain that sometimes we see that the Imam is a child or an old person or a youth, because although he does not change, the Imam doesn't change, it can be that we see him with our eyes as changing, or we see the Imam as two distinct persons, as a father or a son. But once you come to the realization that that drop of sperm in the loins of his father is but one and the same light, a light that transmigrates from loins to loins, and even though the mother's womb that light enters into is perceived by you as imperfect, you may still affirm these words, and we come from the light of God. So what our 23rd Imam is explaining here is an Imam is always an Imam. So before Mawlana Shah Karim passed away, Mawlana Shah Rahim spiritually was the Imam. He was just not declared. That's all. He was not manifest to us. He was not revealed to us, but he was the Imam. He has the Nur of Imamat. His soul was created perfect. He may not show us that until the right time comes. These Imams are Imams before they were declared as Imams. That's the lesson. And this is a very clear teaching in Ismaili texts. The same Imam al-Zikri Salam tells us that in reality, it is impossible for any past or future Imam to be better or more powerful than another, or to be better at one time than at another time. Then he explains the nas. He says in bold here, the nas, the designation which is made, is not in order to make him an Imam. It is only made so that people should recognize him as such. So what we're saying then is Mawlana Shah Rahim was the Imam, and he was the bearer of the Nur of Imamat before the will of Mawlana Shah Karim was read. He was the Imam before Mawlana Shah Karim passed away. That's what our Imams have taught. But we, the Jamaat, we were only made aware of Shah Rahim's status when the will was read. The will of the Imam is read for us. It's not read to inform the new Imam that he's the Imam. And if you think about this very logically, the idea that Maulana Shah Rahim or Maulana Shah Karim or whoever Imam, the idea that they only find out that they're the Imam when the will is read, it does not actually make logical or theological sense. I'll tell you why. Uh, in the last two Imamate successions, the Imam passed away on a certain day and the will was read some 24 hours later. It happened last week, right? Maulana Shah Karim physically passed away on February 4th. The will of Maulana Shah Karim was read on February 5th. So there's about 24 hours or so. There's about a day in between where the will is not read. So is it really possible that our Imam, Maulana Shah Rahim, in reality was unaware from February 4th to February 5th? He was unaware that he was the Imam? No, of course not. Of course not. Same with Maulana Shah Karim. He wasn't like it's not possible that Maulana Shah Karim didn't know he was the Imam from July 11th, 57 to July 12th, 57. So if you think about this logically, there's no other answer except that yes, the next Imam knows he's the next Imam. He knows he's the next Imam, and he spiritually is an Imam. What does change for the next Imam, the day of the death of the prior Imam, what does change is on the death of the prior Imam, the next Imam becomes aware that now the Amr, the authority has passed to him. That's a change. That transfers. No problem. That makes complete sense, right? But even before, even before that Amr comes, then the next Imam knows he's an Imam. But he doesn't have the authority to declare it. Okay. Let's move on to this question. And I'll be honest with you, of all the people who submitted questions, among all of them, this was actually the most popular question. In other words, this question got the most votes. So I understand why people are interested in this question. So I'm going to try to answer this question to the best of my ability. And I fully understand where this question is coming from, right? This question is coming because many of us miss Maulana Shah Karim. We miss our old Imam. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with missing the Imam. It's okay. Okay, it's completely fine. All right. So let's talk about this question. What happens to the departed soul of Maulana Shah Karim? I want to answer this first by telling a quick little anecdote or story. One day, Imam Jafar Sadiq said to his follower, "You are in paradise, so pray that God does not cast you out from it." His companion said to him, "But we are in this world." The Imam said, "Do you not believe in our Imamat?" Companion, "Yes." The Imam replied, "This is the meaning of paradise. Whoever believes in our Imamat is in paradise." So what does this tell us? Whoever believes and recognizes the Imam is in paradise, in Jannah. If this is true about those who believe in the Imam, if you believe in the Imam, you're in paradise. If a believer in the Imam is in paradise, what does that say about the Imam himself? Logically speaking, if a believer in the Imam is in paradise, then obviously the Imam himself is in paradise. The soul of the Imam is always in paradise. I will share with you another quote which will more explicitly answer this question. This is a quote from Mawlana Ali. This can be found in Nahj al-Balagha. I'm quoting here the new translation of Nahj al-Balagha, which you can find online for free. So on page 461, Imam Ali says, "O people, I belong to a group who care not if they are criticized when their actions are for the sake of God." I won't read the rest of the quote, but right to the end, Imam says, "Our hearts are in paradise, while our bodies are occupied here with doing good." That's what he said. So here the Imam says that when the Imam of the time is in this world, even though he's physically in this world and he's working, and we all know that Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini physically has just worked tirelessly. Some people even call him a workaholic. And I know that Mawlana Shah Rahim is also going to be physically working tirelessly for us. But even though they are physically at work in this world, their hearts, their souls are already in paradise. The soul of Mawlana Shah Karim is in paradise and it never left paradise. Why? Because the soul of every Imam, including Mawlana Shah Karim, is always perfect and is always the mirror of the Nur of Imamat. So again, this goes back to this transfer thing. There is no transference of the Nur of Imamat from Shah Karim to Shah Rahim. Rather, the Nur of Imamat permanently remains in every Imam. So when Shah Karim passes away, he does not lose the Nur of Imamat, right? Nur of Imamat is not it's not a physical baton. It goes to the next guy, and then the previous Imam somehow lost the Nur. This is not how it works. So Mawlana Shah Karim's departed soul continues to be united with the Nur of Imamat. And the death of an Imam only means the disassociation between the soul of the Imam and his physical body. That's all death means for an Imam. The soul of Mawlana Shah Karim is perfect. His soul is not going on some spiritual journey of salvation. And I'm saying this because some people would say, and everybody means well, I understand, but some people in the Jamaat might say, "Oh, I hope Shah Karim rests in peace. I hope Allah has mercy on Shah Karim," or different things like this. But there is no need to say this. The soul of Mawlana Shah Karim is always at peace. It's always in paradise. The death of the Imam is simply the disassociation between the Imam's nurani soul and his physical body. That is it. Somebody had once asked I think on the Ismaili Gnosis group, and again, this is an innocent question. They asked, you know, does Shah Karim get questioned on the Day of Judgment? Will he be judged? The answer is no. The answer is no. There's a well-known concept in Sufi and Ismaili Islam, which basically says that some souls are perfect, and on the Day of Judgment, after they die, they are exempt from questioning. I've quoted that text for you here. So here we have Nasiruddin Tusi. He says, "It is reported in a tradition when the dervishes are brought to the place of reckoning, judgment, the angels will demand their accounts. In reply, they will say, 'What have you given us that makes us accountable to you?' Then the commandment of the exalted Lord will be heard. They are right. Their account is not any concern of yours." So that's it. Mawlana Shah Karim and all our Imams, they are not questioned on the Day of Judgment. Actually, it's the other way around. When you go through your personal judgment, that judgment will be in the presence of the Imam of your time. That's what the Quran says, Surah 17, verse 71. On the day that we shall call all people through their Imam. And then it describes people being given their record of deeds. So your judgment, my judgment, all of our souls, we will be judged after our physical death in the presence of the Imam. And the Imam is the one who is going to do the judgment on behalf of God. So the judge himself does not undergo judgment. A related question on this is, does paradise mean being with the Nur of Imamat? Yes. So Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah, in his Chandrath Farmans, which you can read because they're in Kamaluddin's otherwise Kamaluddin. He wrote a book called Majalis and Tasbiha, and in that book you can read the Chandrath Farmans. So Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah defines paradise in the Chandrath Farmans as a realm in the next world where you have nurani didar. Nurani didar. So, from an Ismaili perspective, paradise is to have nurani didar. Okay, so obviously, then, the Imam is in paradise because he's the one giving didar, right? The Imam is in the paradise to light it up. The Imam is the one giving didar in paradise. So then the Imam must be in paradise. In fact, the Imam is in paradise even when he's on earth. I don't know if you guys have read the book by Azmina Suleiman. It's called A Passage to Eternity. Azmina Suleiman is an Ismaili Muslim from Calgary. She had a near-death experience. She actually crossed over to the next world. And of course, this is her interpretation, but it's very valuable to read. And she basically says in her book, when she recollected what she experienced, that in the next world, Mawlana Shah Karim and other Imams were present. She saw Mawlana Shah Karim, she saw Prophet Muhammad. They were already present in the next world. Even though Mawlana Shah Karim was physically present in our world, his soul is also present in the afterlife realms. So the short answer to this question is soul of Maulana Shah Karim is already perfect and does not need to accomplish anything after death. He does not need to be forgiven. None of this stuff applies. So then how do we relate to Maulana Shah Karim? So a good way to think about this is, what did Maulana Shah Karim tell us about Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah when Maulana Shah Karim succeeded to the Imamat in 1957? So in this quotation, this was the first time Mawlana Shah Karim met with the Jamat after his succession as Imam. And he said about Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, "You have lost the finest Imam we have had. I hope you do not think that because he is not physically with us, that he won't watch over you." So, what does this tell us? This tells us that the departed soul of Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah, and by extension, the departed soul of Maulana Shah Karim al-Husseini, their souls still existing in the next world, and their souls continue to be in a relationship with us. And you can still call out to Maulana Shah Karim. We just heard in the Takht Nashini Farman, Maulana Shah Rahim told us, call on the name of all of your Imams. I'm paraphrasing it. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but he said, call on the name of all of your Imams. Well, Maulana Shah Karim is among them. So if you want to, as a sort of supererogatory practice, if you want to call the name of Shah Karim al-Husseini on your tasbih, you are completely free to do that. Just because Maulana Shah Karim has left this world, it doesn't mean that our relationship with Maulana Shah Karim is over. That relationship will always exist. It's just different now. It's just different. But we will always be connected to Maulana Shah Karim, and not only him, we have a relationship with all the Imams. They are still our Imams, right? That's why we refer to them in our dua as Mawlana. Mawlana means our Lord or our Master. So all the past Imams who've left this world physically, they're still Imams. They still exist in the form of a soul. And we're still in communion with the departed Imams. We are still in communion with Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah. We are still in communion with Maulana Shah Karim al-Husseini. But in this world, our present Hazar Imam is now Maulana Shah Rahim al-Husseini. And that's why we all had to take a bayah to the new Imam. And Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah has said in Farmans, when there's a new Imam, you have to take bayah to him. That's why we do that. Okay, so I believe that I've covered all the sort of core questions, okay, like the core questions that were submitted over here. We have covered all of these in the main part of the presentation. What I'm happy to do now is cover other questions that will have a much shorter answer. We're going to start our rapid fire round, and we have about, well, we have time. We don't have to rush through this. So what we'll do is I will just create a rapid fire slide to do this. So we'll do this how it worked last time. I will copy the question onto the slide. And I'll attempt to answer these questions. So let's begin with what was submitted on the Google Doc, if that's okay. So I'm just going to go to the Google Doc and fish some questions for us. And we do have a lot of questions. So we'll see what we can get to. And I'm going to try not to repeat. So for example, a lot of this stuff has been answered. I'll try to pick something that has not been answered yet. So here's like an easy one here. So there's a general question. I'll just write it out on a slide. There is a general question about, is the Imam in Ismaili? Is Hazar Imam Ismaili? Is the Imam's family members, or are the Imam's family members Ismailis? All right, so this is a very common question, gets asked somewhat often. I'm going to first direct you to where you can find an in-depth answer. So if you go to ask.ismailinosis.com and you just search, we have an entry, is Mawlana Hazar Imam Ismaili? Is his family Ismaili? So the short answer is yes. Yes, Mawlana Hazar Imam is Ismaili. Why? Because technically, Ismaili means anyone who accepts and believes that the Imamat continues in the lineage of Ismail, son of Imam Jafar Sadiq. That's what it means to be Ismaili. Does Hazar Imam believe that the Imamat continues in the line of Imam Ismail? Of course he does. So he's Ismaili. Of course, the term Ismaili, in this sense, actually foremost belongs to the Imams. The Imam has more of a right to be called Ismaili because he is from the line of Ismail, right? That's what it means to be Ismaili. Most technically, the descendants of Ismail are Ismaili. So yes, Hazar Imam is Ismaili. He believes in his own Imamat, so he's Ismaili. The term Ismaili, of course, is a historical label. It's not what we called ourselves. Now, I would also refer to examples where one of our Imams calls himself Ismaili. So here, Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah says, we Ismailis. Another text, this is Mawlana Shah Karim, we Ismailis. Another one, on their religion, we Ismailis have no view. We also have Mawlana Shah Karim calling himself the Ismaili Imam. So the label Ismaili, in the most technical sense, does apply to the Imam. The term Ismaili embraces the Imam and the Murids and the community. So both the Imam and the community are Ismaili. The Imam, however, is not a Murid. The Imam is not a Murid of himself. We are murids of the Imam. Now, what you should be aware of, because I know somebody will ask, oh, but how can the Imam be Ismaili? He didn't give bayah he can't give bayah to himself. I agree, but he's still Ismaili in the more fundamental sense. If you require bayah to be an Ismaili, I can still say that Mawlana Shah Karim gave bayah to the previous Imam. And every previous Imam gives bayah to his father or his grandfather, whoever it is. So you could argue also that since each Imam gave bayah to their predecessor, they are also Ismaili in that sense. So yes. What about the Imam's family members? So it's hard to answer that question specifically, but we can say this much. It's pretty well known that the children of Maulana Shah Karim were brought up as Ismaili Muslims. They were educated by Al-Wise Kamaluddin and Al-Wise Zarina Kamaluddin. Both of these Al-Wises have written a memoir which has been passed around as a PDF. It's called Golden Memories. And if you read that memoir, it's unambiguously clear that Maulana Shah Rahim, Princess Zara, Prince Hussein, they were brought up as Ismailis. They learned the Ismaili dua. They greet each other. They greeted Kamaluddin and his wife. They greet the Jamati leaders with Yali Madad. So as far as I can see, there's really no debate to be had. The answer is yes. The Imam and his family are Ismaili Muslims, without a doubt. Let me go to another question. This is sort of an ancillary question. Is the silent Imam incapable of sin? So yes, the Imam, whether he is speaking or silent, the Imam is the mirror of the Nur of Imamat. Therefore, the Imam is incapable of committing sins. That is correct, whether he's a speaking Imam or whether he's a silent Imam. That's a quick answer. Now, this one is interesting. Does the Imam go to Jamatkhana? Well, I mean, sometimes the Imam gives didar in Jamatkhana. So to be a little cute, the technical answer is yeah, the Imam does go to Jamatkhana. But I suspect that is not what you mean by the question. The question, it seems to be, does the Imam practice his faith in Jamatkhana, right? That seems to be the question. The short answer is the Imam's soul is always perfect and in complete remembrance and communion with Allah through the Nur of Imamat. This is just part of the definition of being the Imam. So the Imam does not need to perform any type of formal religious practice, but the Imam may choose to partake in any religious practices that he wishes to partake in. So sometimes the Imam will be invited to a Sunni masjid to participate in namaz, and he'll go participate in namaz. There's no problem with that. There's no issue. So in Jamatkhana, if the Imam comes to Jamatkhana, he doesn't come to practice his faith. The Imam comes to Jamatkhana to give didar. That's historically how it works. The Imam doesn't need any type of formal religious practice, but if he wants to, he can practice whatever he wants. It doesn't really have an effect on him though, because he's the Imam. All right, let me go to more of these. I'm prioritizing the Google form question because those were submitted in advance. We've again, a lot of these we've answered already. So again, somebody said Imam Shah Rahim is not Ismaili. No, of course he's Ismaili. Every Imam is Ismaili. Is it Allah who selects the new Imam? Yes, ultimately, who the next Imam is, this is all preordained, right? This is all preordained in the universal intellect. And Allah created the universal intellect. So, in that general sense, yes, it is God who appoints the new Imam, but the actual appointment is executed by the prior Imam, right? At a physical level, the prior Imam appoints the next Imam, but ultimately, this is understood by Ismailis as a divine appointment, a divine nation. Now, I know somebody has said in the chat and elsewhere, Mawlana Shah Karim said he had no idea he would be appointed. How can we say he's always aware? Look, it's very simple. Our imams, when they give public interviews, they don't reveal everything that they know. That is not the place or the forum for the imam to reveal the deeper mysteries of imamat. It doesn't make sense, and it's not prudent for the imam to tell a journalist who just sees him as an ordinary, guy. It's not prudent for the imam to say, "Oh, I already did know." Because they'll say, "How did you know?" And then what is the imam going to explain to the journalist that what the Nur of Imamat is and all this? It's just not prudent, and it doesn't make sense to have that conversation uh with the journalist. Oh, there's a typo on this slide. Let me just correct this. It should say it does. Let me clarify. The imam does not need to perform any type of formal religious practice, just to be clear, because that's what I said. Okay. So yeah, I know a lot of people will say, yeah, this imam says he doesn't know. Maybe the next imam will say he didn't know. Look, there's a general principle in our history called the concept of taqiyya, and the imams say taqiyya is our religion. So the imam, when he articulates something to like a public journalist, the imam is very careful about what he says and what he doesn't say. But our Imam has also told us to read our history to understand who the Imam is. He has said that. And when you read our history, it's very clear that the Imam who is to come knows he's going to be the Imam. It's very clear from our sources. Okay, let me continue looking at questions. I'm focusing on core questions. If there's questions about why is Jamatkhana private, why don't we do namaz? This is just not the forum to talk about them. A lot of these are repeats actually, or stuff we've already addressed. Can Hazar Imam designate one of his brothers to be the next Imam? No, the answer is no. According to what our past and present Imams have said, the Imamat can only lineal descent. The will of Mawlana Shah Karim said, if I recall from memory now, it said sons or remoter male descendants. Brothers are not male descendants, so imamat cannot go from brother to brother. Now, what you can have sometimes, you can have a trustee imam, mustauda imam, who is the brother of the real imam, while the real imam is in hiding. Okay. Example, Imam Hassan was a trustee imam. Imam Mahdi's uncle was a trustee imam. So you can have trustee imams, okay? But the lineage of imamat does not continue in the lineage of the trustee imam. It always returns to the hereditary imam and his lineage. So that would be the answer to that question. Again, I'll look through the Zoom again. To be honest, sorry, not the Zoom, the Google. I'm trying to do the Google questions first, but to be honest, a lot of them are the same question. repeated, which is totally fine. And this is an interesting question. Um, where did they go here? So a lot of questions are about transfer of Nur. I think we've totally answered. We've answered those already. This is something I addressed, but I'm just going to repeat it for the sake of clarity. So here's a question. Are the soul and nur different things? If it is, that means each imam had a different soul, then is the nur ever present at all times and takes over all the actions? Yeah, so this is what I was getting at. Yes, the soul of the imams and the nur of imamat are distinct entities, okay? The soul of an imam is the mirror or mazhar of the single nur of imamat. Each imam each imam's soul is its own mirror. So we have multiple mirrors and one light reflected in the multiple mirrors. This is what I said earlier, and I'm just clarifying this. Look, admittedly, this may sound like an odd idea to some of you. You probably, maybe you haven't heard of this, but that's okay. You don't have to accept what I'm saying, but think about it. In my view, this is a teaching that we have, and it actually has helpful explanatory value when we're talking about it, right? Uh, the imams have to have different souls because what we have in the world is sometimes we have four imams or two imams or three imams. So we have four bodies, different personalities, right? So it would only make sense that they have different souls, but you can have many souls and one nur, one light manifested in multiple souls. There's nothing problematic about that. Okay. Now, this again is a repeat, but I'm just reiterating the question. So this question, if the Nur is transferred, then what happens to Shah Karim's soul? Is it pure or just the Nur pure? Yeah. So the answer is the Nur itself is not transferred. Shah Karim's soul continues and always will be the bearer of the Nur of Imamat. The succeeding Imam is also the bearer of the same Nur of Imamat forever. You can have one light reflecting in two mirrors or souls at the same time. You can even have more than that. Okay, I'm going to turn to the Zoom questions now. Our team has kindly curated questions in the chat for me to see. Again, some of these are repeats and some of them are sort of off topic. Question, it's probably goes, I said earlier. How can we find Allah if he is not in the spiritual world? Okay, now this is a question this is more about spiritual search. The short answer is, in Ismaili philosophy, we search for and try to experience the Nur of Imamat called the Universal Intellect. By experiencing the Nur of Imamat, we can come closer and closer to Allah. This is not my opinion. This is what Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini taught us throughout his Imamat. And if you want to learn more about this, you go to Morning Khane. And after Morning Khane, ask to read the Baitul Khiyal Farmans and read through them. This is what Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini has taught us. He's taught us the way to find Allah if Allah is not actually in the spiritual world. Okay, let's continue. So I'm just going through the Zoom submitted questions here. Okay, now this is an interesting question. Accepting the principle of Tawheed that Allah is one and beyond the physical and spiritual worlds, what is the wisdom behind saying Ali is Allah? Okay, very interesting. The term Allah can be understood in two senses. Like there are two interpretations of the word Allah. The first is Allah is a name, but not a description. In this case, Allah refers to the absolutely transcendent God beyond all things. Okay. So if the word Allah is a name, but not a description or not a predicate, then it refers to the God who is beyond all things. Example, Surat al-Ikhlas, Allah is a name, but not a description. Second, Allah as a word can also function as a predicate or a description. In this case, the name Allah refers to all of the divine attributes like Rahman, Rahim, Nur, Jalal, Jamal. These are all descriptions and cannot apply to God himself. Rather, these divine names or descriptions only apply to the universal intellect, which is the Nur of Imamat. Okay, so the name Allah has two different senses. Therefore, in the Ginans, whenever it is suggested that Ali or Imam is Allah, the name Allah functions as a predicate description, not referring to God himself, but to the divine attributes. Thus, the phrase Ali is or Imam is Allah means Ali or Imam is the universal intellect. Okay, that is how these things should be interpreted. Make it a little bigger. This is how the Ginans and other statements to this effect. This is how they're supposed to be interpreted. Now, this is not my personal opinion. I didn't just make this up. This is how our peer Shahabuddin Shah. This is how peer Shahabuddin Shah explained it. Actually, he was asked the same question, basically, from this. So here, let me just show you. Let me quote. Let me put on the slide what was said. So I'm gonna take from his So Pir Shahabuddin Shah was asked. He said, people told him, like these Hindus believe that like Vishnu or God took on physical form, and some people believe that the Imams are God. Like people went to Shahabuddin Shah and they said, some people believe the Imams are God. So Pir Shahabuddin Shah answered as follows. He says, God has given the totality of his power and kingdom to the Nur of Imam, to the light of Ali. However, the one God is the God of whom not a word should be said. Okay, that's what Pir Shahabuddin Shah said. And then he goes on to say that, it's just a misunderstanding. When people literally say the Imam is God, this is a misunderstanding on their part. Uh, he says basically in his book, the Khitabat Aliyah, Pir Shahabuddin Shah basically says that, uh, this idea is just sort of a misarticulation of the truth. Okay. So I'm giving you here on the slide a way to sort of interpret this type of language so it's not problematic, because our traditions, our sources are very clear that God, Allah, is absolutely transcendent, and the Nur of Imamat is creation, it's the highest creation, and the Nur of Imamat is the closest that we can come to Allah. Allah is unattainable, completely unattainable. So the Nur of Imamat is our closest access to Allah, and it's the Nur of Imamat that is manifest in the person of the Imam. That's what Pir Shahabuddin Shah says. That's what the Fatimid Dais said. That's what the Alamut period Dais said. Okay, let's continue. Look at more of the questions here. Okay, I believe there's a question about what is a peer. I think that's been asked. I think it was asked on Google, and let me check here. Or was asked on Zoom. So let's chat a little bit about that. So again, I could do a whole talk on what is a peer, but I'm going to give a short explanation on what a peer is. All right. So what is the role of the peer in Ismaili history and practice? So firstly, why are we having this conversation? I'm aware that there have been conversations happening among many Jamaati members all week where people are asking, what is a peer, and what's the role of the peer, and so on. Okay. So we are having this conversation because the will of Mawlana Shah Karim was read out this week. Mawlana Shah Rahim wanted the Jamat to hear the will, parts of the will rather, of Mawlana Shah Karim. And in the will, the word peer comes up. So I'm actually going to put for you just a sentence of the will of Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah and the will of Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini. Just one sentence, because we have to pay attention to this. So Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, in his 1957 will, says, I appoint my grandson Karim to be the Imam and Peer of my Shia Ismailian followers. Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini, in his 2025 will, said, I hereby designate my eldest son, Prince Rahim Aga Khan, on my death to be the Imam and Peer of all Shia Imami Ismaili Muslims. So what is a peer? Is peer different from Imam? So generally speaking, throughout our history, the Imam of the time functions as the supreme teacher, the supreme commander of the faith. But under the Imam of the time, there are different ranks of spiritual teachers under the Imam. So between the Murid and the Imam, there were different intermediary spiritual ranks. And if someone on our team could post in the chat the Ismaili Gnosis article about the ranks of the Dawa, I think that would be very helpful. So the details of what I'm about to say are going to be in that article. So in fact, it's just been posted now. So in fact, let me actually put that on the screen. So this is like a diagram from Dr. Shafiq Virani's book about the rank. So you have the Imam is at the top, and then the right under the Imam, we have somebody called Hujjat the Akbar or Babi Akdas. Then we have Hujjat the Asgar, then we have Dais, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole hierarchy. Here's a simplified version of it for you over here. Imam, Bab, Hujjat, Dai, Madun Akbar, Madun Asgar, Mustajib. Okay? This is a Dawa hierarchy. These are the teachers under the Imam. And traditionally, until modern times, all of our learning of the Imam's Tawil and Ta'lim, it would be reaching us through one of these ranks. very rarely would you hear from the Imam's own mouth. And there were many historical and different reasons for this. So what is a peer? The peer is actually the rank of the Bab. Okay, the rank of the Bab. So if we scroll back here, the Bab of the Imam, Bab means gate. So the number two, the Imam's number two man, if you could say, that is the peer. So that's the rank of Bab. Now there are different names for the peer. Peer is a Persian word. In the Fatimid period, the peer was called Bab. In the Alamut period, the peer is called Hujjat the Azam, the supreme Hujjah, the supreme proof. And there are actually four Babs of the Imam at any given time, and one of those four Babs is what we now call peer. Okay, the peer. So that's just some general background for you. Now, what is a peer? Why is this important? So our Imam Shah Garib Mirza, who is also known as Imam Mustansibullah III, he tells us in Pandiyati Jaman Mardi what a peer is, and I'm just going to read out this. He says, O believers, if you wish to perfect your knowledge of God and attain gnosis of him, accept the commandments of the peer of your time. Do whatever he tells you, never straying from his order. Remain forever within his command, so you may be among the people of spiritual unveiling. He continues, the peer is someone upon whom the Imam of the time bestows this position, which makes him, the peer, the noblest being of all creation. Whenever he has appointed and established a peer, the peer must explain the matters of gnosis, marifa, in detail. Through his mediation, you must perfect your recognition of the Imam. So the peer is an incredibly exalted and high position of spiritual authority within the Ismaili Tariqah. The peer must be appointed directly by the Imam of the time, and the peer always comes from the descendants of the Imam, of a past Imam or the family of the current Imam. The peer's position is so important that as long as there's been Imams on earth, there have also been peers on earth. Okay, there's an Imam and a peer. The Imam always has a peer. Sometimes the Imam is the peer. Other times the Imam appoints an external peer, somebody who's not the same as the Imam. Mawlana Shah Karim was Imam and peer. Mawlana Sultan Mahmud Shah was Imam and peer. And you know how we know, besides the will, do you remember when Mawlana Shah Karim would give us paternal and maternal loving blessings? So the paternal blessings, the fatherly blessings, are from the Imam, because the Imam is the spiritual father of the murids. The maternal blessings are the blessings of the peer, because the peer is the spiritual mother of the murids. The peer is the spiritual mother. The peer is actually the murshid of the Ismaili Tariqah. The peer is our spiritual guide. The peer is in charge of all Jamati rituals. So the peer is very important. In fact, we have had, in addition to 50 Imams from the time of Prophet Muhammad, in addition to 50 Imams, we have had by now 51 peers. And we used to recite the peers and Imams in our old dua. So this is a list. This is from the time of Mawlana Sultan Mahmud Shah, so it's a bit dated. But this is a list of Imams and Hujjats. And by the way, this list is not from India. This list is from Iran. So actually, all Ismailis, regardless of the tradition, all Ismailis believe in the Imams and the peers, but they sometimes will have a different word for the peer. So the Iranian Ismailis refer to our peers as Hujjats. The Syrian Ismailis, they might refer to the peer as Hujjat or as Bab, but they do believe in the same peers that we do, because there are There are Syrian Ismaili scholars like Mustafa Ghalib, and in their writings, like they mention the same peers that we have. So this list is from Iran, what you see on the screen here. This is not from India. This is an Iranian list. And if you look, here are the names of the Imams. And by the way, the translation is not the best. This is Ivanov translating it in like 1938, so it's not the best. But you have Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, Imam Zain al-Abidin, and then you have the peers. Now, you'll notice that sometimes the peer is the Imam. Okay, so take Imam Zain al-Abidin. Imam Zain al-Abidin, he was Imam and peer, so his name is in both lists, right? But in most of the history, the Imam is different from the peer. He's a different person. But these peers, they all come from the family or the descendants of an Imam. So, for example, our first peer was Prophet Muhammad. Our second peer was Hazrat Hassan. Our third peer was Qasim, the son of Hassan, and so on. So this is our list of peers, and if you move to this side, you will notice some familiar names. We have Peer Southerden, Peer Hassan Kabirdin, Peer Tajdin. Then if you keep going, we have Peer Sarkar Mata Salamat. This is Imam Hassan Ali Shah's mother. She was our peer. Then Imam Hassan Ali Shah himself was our peer. Imam Ali Shah, Aga Ali Shah, before he became the Imam, he was our peer. Then we have Peer Shabuddin Shah, who I've quoted. He was also known as Peer Khalilullah. Okay, so these are our peers, and these peers are not Indian, they are Iranian, like they're from the family of the Imam. So this is not just a Khoja belief. All Ismailis believe in peers, they just have different names for this. So there's an Imamat lineage and there's a Piratan lineage. It's really funny though, because until last week, like nobody in the Jamaat was talking about this, like this was just not being talked about. And this week, everybody's talking about it, which I think is really cool. A little bit more on how the peer functions. So we know from eyewitness accounts reported by Al-Wais Abu Ali that in recent history, when we've had peers who are like different from the Imam, the peer would actually come to Jamatkhana, and the peer, well, let me put it this way. If the peer comes to Jamatkhana, the peer gets all the varos. We don't get any. The peer says dua, the peer says tasbih, the peer gives the farman. And when Imam Ali Shah, when he was the peer, Hassan Ali Shah, his father, was the Imam. And both of them, and this is a picture of them, both of them would come to Khane together. They'd come to Darkhana in India, and Imam Hassan Ali Shah would sit on the takht, and he wouldn't say anything. He would just sit, and everybody would get the Imam's didar, and then Pir Aga Ali Shah, he would make the farman, he would conduct all the religious ceremonies. And then later Pir Shabuddin Shah did the same thing. After Pir Shabuddin Shah, his son, Pir Abul Hassan Shah, he became Pir when he was a baby. He was a 6-month-old baby. And the Jamaat would go to his crib and they would ask for his blessings. And this peer, as a baby, he would sort of like smile. He would smile and he would like move his hand, and that's how the baby peer conveyed blessings to the Jamaat. Now, with Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah, the role of peer has been subsumed and merged with the role of the Imam. So from Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah forward, the peer and Imam are the same person. And this is why Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah designated Mawlana Shah Karim as Imam and peer. Mawlana Shah Karim has designated Mawlana Shah Rahim as Imam and peer. Okay, so that's just some something for you guys to learn, and there's definitely more to talk about on this topic. All right, let me go back to the chat here. Let's see. So again, a lot of the questions I've already answered. I'm going to try to hit questions that haven't been answered. What is the concept of ta'id? So this is on a prior slide, and I'll just go back to that. So if I just go here, all right. So ta'id is a process. It's a continuous process by which knowledge, wisdom, guidance, and nur from the Nur of Imamat flows into and upon the pure soul of every imam. That is what ta'id is. So when our imam gives guidance, when he makes a decision, when he takes an action, the imam is continuously being refreshed with ta'id. And through that ta'id, our imam guides us on the right path. Let me see if there's other questions here. I know there's a question about the seventh imam of seventh cycle. I've given a prior talk on that, and we can, if I have time, in the month of Ramadan, I'll give that talk again, basically. Let me see if there's more questions here. Again, I want to acknowledge that a lot of you sent questions, but I just want to say that from what I'm seeing of the questions, I believe that through this session, we have attempted to answer all of them. Is the intellect or Nur of Imamat the Lord of the Day of Judgment? So actually, Nasser Khusro says in his book that uh, the judgment of souls happens in the presence of the Universal Intellect, which has been created by God. So, in a sense, the day of judgment does occur in the presence before face to face with the Nur of Imamat. Because if you think about it, the very concept of judgment, the very concept of right and wrong, can only exist if intellect exists. And the only reason why we humans are subject to judgment, to moral judgment, to right and wrong, is because all humans within our soul, we possess a glimmer of the Nur of Imamat, which is our own individual intellect. That's what it is. So yes, our own judgment is connected to the intellect because intellect is the very source of any kind of judgment. All right, I think we've dealt with almost all the topical questions that came up. Oh, here's one that I should answer. In reference to multiple pure souls, is it correct that the members of the Nurani family have pure souls? Okay, so here's the thing. Firstly, we actually should not call the Imam's family the Nurani family. To my knowledge, none of our Imams have ever called the family of the Imam the Nurani family because it's a bit of a misnomer. Misnomer. Uh, Only the Imams are Nurani. Okay, only the Imams are Nurani. Other members of the Imam's family, they could be at any level. They could be at a Nurani level, they could, but it's not necessarily the case because if we read our history, we know that in the past there have been members of the Imam's family who have betrayed the Imam or who just don't really care about the imamate. Now, I will say this much. The last will of Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini made it very clear that as murids, we have to have loyalty to the succeeding imam, Mawlana Shah Rahim, and his successors. The will mentioned the successor of my successor. So the late imam has ordered us to do that. And the late Imam has also guided us to have affection for his family. So our role is not to revere the Imam's family, okay, because they're not necessarily Nurani, but we can have affection for the Imam's family because the Imam's family members have sacrificed so much in supporting his imamat and in helping improve our lives. So we can have respect, we should have respect and affection for the Imam's family, because they've really given up a lot for us. And our Mawlana Shah Karim asked us to have affection for his family. I think we're about finished. So I want to end with, I want to play a little video clip, which I'm sure many of you have seen it. And I want you to remember what I said earlier. Mawlana Shah Karim has passed away from this world physically. He is not absent spiritually. Mawlana Shah Karim is still present and living in the form of his perfect soul. And while serving our new Imam and giving bayah to our new Imam, our relationship with Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini will continue. It will evolve, but it will continue. So let us end with a few words of love and affection from Mawlana Shah Karim al-Husseini, which I'm going to just play in this clip.
Keep in mind, please keep in mind, that the Imam is always with you. There isn't a second in the day or the night when the Imam is not with you. He is always with you. I am ambitious for you, but ambitious for you in the right way. Just as a father and mother is ambitious for his children, he wants them to work well, properly, ethically. These are the thoughts that I share with you. And although I will be leaving you physically today, I'm always with you. I watch over you, I think over you, I pray for you, and I want you to know that I'm always with my Jamat. I have had nothing else of real significance in my life other than serving the Jamat. Kana.
All right, with that, we are going to conclude. I would like to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar. It was an honor to be able to share some of these perspectives with you, and I would like to give a big thanks to our team here who've been managing the questions and the chat. And I hope this is just the first of many discussions and conversations. Many in the Jamaat are exploring their faith, and we need to all do our best to be a brother and sister to our fellow Ismailis and help guide people in their personal search. This is a very critical time within our community, and we can all do our part to help one another find knowledge and find comfort through learning about our faith. So with that, I bid you all, Ya Ali Madad.